Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're cutting straight through the noise of traditional shame-based financial advice. You know exactly the type I'm talking about, the kind that makes you feel incredibly guilty for just buying a sandwich. Instead, we're diving into a purely data-backed roadmap to building wealth. We're pulling directly from the top expert-curated 2026 personal finance books, and specifically Nick Maggiulli's hard-hitting research in his book, Just Keep Buying. Get ready, because we're going to unpack the math, the mindset, and the actual practical habits that create lasting financial freedom.
So, let's jump right into this really provocative question. Are you saving too much or just earning too little? The answer here absolutely challenges everything you've probably been told about, skipping your daily latte to get rich. The mainstream financial media loves pushing this narrative that if you just stop buying $5 coffees, you'll eventually become a millionaire. But is that actually true, or is it literally one of the biggest myths in personal finance? Well, to figure out how to truly build wealth, we first need to completely rewire how we think about money.
Which brings us to Section 1, Mindset over Math and the Psychology of Money. Before we even look at the raw numbers, what I found absolutely fascinating across our sources is this core idea. Wealth is fundamentally a behavior problem, not a math problem. Getting rich, and more importantly, staying rich, requires entirely different skills like patience and humility, rather than just knowing your way around a spreadsheet. Thomas Stanley's decades of research in The Millionaire Next Door backs this up perfectly. He shows that so many high-income earners, doctors, lawyers, tech folks, fall right into the trap of status symbol spending. They buy the luxury cars, the massive houses, and end up becoming what the book calls underaccumulators of wealth. Sure, they have an impressive income, but surprisingly, very little actual savings to show for it. Meanwhile, true prodigious accumulators of wealth often live in modest neighborhoods and drive used cars. Their behavior actually matches their long-term goals.
Moving on to Section 2, the Save-Invest Continuum, and figuring out exactly where to focus your energy.
To make sure you're actually accumulating wealth and not just looking rich, Nick Maggiulli's data introduces this fascinating framework. It helps you figure out exactly where to focus your financial energy right now. Here's how you do the math. You compare your expected annual savings with your expected investment growth. If your expected annual savings are higher than your expected investment growth, your focus has to be on saving. In a relative sense, the saying goes, saving is for the poor, which really just means early in your wealth journey, your raw contributions matter the most. But, and this is a real game changer, what happens as your portfolio grows? Once your investments start generating more money than you could ever realistically save in a single year, your focus has to shift entirely. At that stage, investing is for the rich. What's so wild to see here is how the math physically shifts over time. In the first few decades of your working life, your annual savings, your raw contributions, matter immensely. They're doing all the heavy lifting. But as time goes on, the investment growth takes over. By the end of a 40-year timeline, a staggering 70% of your total wealth comes directly from investment gains, not your annual contributions. It's that classic snowball effect taking over completely. This leads us perfectly into Section 3, the Great Savings Myth, where we completely dismantle the 20% rule. Okay, so to get to that magical point where compound interest takes over, we really have to dismantle this rigid and frankly empirically false rule that everyone should just save 20% of their income. To understand why a flat 20% rule is terrible advice, let's actually look at nature for a second. Up in the streams of southern Alaska, there's this fish called the Dolly Varden char. When salmon eggs are plentiful, these fish literally grow their digestive tracts to double their normal size in this massive feeding frenzy. But when food is scarce, they shrink their organs back down to conserve energy. Just like these incredible fish adapting to the seasonal availability of food, your savings rate needs to flexibly adapt to your income. You shouldn't blindly follow some arbitrary 20% rule. You should simply save what you can, exactly when you can. And the data totally backs this up. Looking at the Consumer Expenditure Survey brilliantly illustrates why you can't just cut your spending to get rich. The lowest 20% of earners in the US physically spend more than their entire take-home pay. We're talking over 100%, just on basic survival categories like food, healthcare, housing, and transportation. I mean, if someone is earning roughly $1,000 a month but having to spend almost $2,000 on absolute necessities, telling them to cut out the lattes is incredibly out of touch. There is literally zero wiggle room there. So let's move up to the next tier and see how this builds for the 20th to 40th percentile of earners. Even when making nearly 3 times more than the bottom tier, this group still spends almost everything just to get by on basic necessities. The numbers clearly show that cutting costs just isn't a feasible path to wealth for this demographic either. The money simply isn't there to cut.
But here is the crucial turning point. Look at what happens with the top 20% of earners. The share of their income spent on basic necessities drops dramatically. It falls to less than 50%. This happens because of what's called the law of the stomach, or diminishing marginal utility. Basically, a person making 10 times more money doesn't eat 10 times more food, right? Or need 10 times more healthcare. Wealthy people spend a much smaller percentage of their income on necessities, and that is exactly what gives them the massive built-in surplus needed to invest.
Which brings us right to Section 4. Focus on growing your income and converting your human capital. All of this data definitively proves one thing. You simply cannot penny pinch your way to millions if your income is too low. The biggest lie in personal finance is that you can just cut your way to wealth. Instead, you have to focus entirely on increasing your income. To do that, Maggiulli outlines 5 actionable ways to unlock your human capital, which is just the value of your skills, knowledge, and time. You can sell your time and expertise, sell a specific service online, teach a scalable skill to others, or build and sell a product. But he also reminds us of a highly underrated option today, climbing the corporate ladder. Despite our modern obsession with side hustles, advancing in a traditional professional career remains one of the absolute most reliable and data-backed paths to becoming a millionaire.
And finally, Section 5, the ultimate wealth strategy, where we synthesize the best resources out there.
Once your income is growing and your spending is reasonably optimized, it's time to deploy the ultimate wealth strategy. This beautifully synthesizes our expert-curated 2026 reading stack. You see, the most effective learners build their knowledge in order of conceptual dependency. So first, you start by fixing your mindset with Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. Second, you automate your savings and habits so willpower isn't even a factor. That's Ramit Sethi's playbook. Third, you establish your strategy by buying low-cost passive index funds, just like John Bogle advocates. And finally, you let the data guide your execution with Nick Maggiulli's Just Keep Buying.
And that execution, it boils down to a brilliant, simple, 3-word mantra that completely removes the anxiety of market timing. Just keep buying. Instead of hoarding cash, waiting for the perfect market dip, you treat investing exactly like paying your rent or buying your groceries. You just do it often. Whether it's a bull market or a bear market, just keep buying a diverse set of income-producing assets. The data proves time and again that consistent, ongoing purchasing beats almost every single market timing strategy out there over a 20-year horizon.
Now, as your wealth grows through all this continuous buying, we do have to keep our ultimate goals in check. There's a vital counterpoint that I found incredibly eye-opening from Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero. He points out that the ultimate goal of life isn't just to achieve the maximum possible net worth on the day you die. In fact, doing that at the expense of present-day experiences is actually a massive form of life mismanagement. Instead, you should optimize for a life rich with experiences. Because just like financial interest compounds numerically in your bank account, your experiences create a memory dividend that compounds psychologically, bringing you immense joy for decades as you look back on them. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative final thought to calculate today. Where do you currently stand on the save-invest continuum? Is your expected savings higher, meaning you really need to focus on growing your income, or is your investment growth higher, meaning it's time to focus on optimizing that portfolio? Take a look at your numbers today and ask yourself, what is the very next action you're going to take to convert your human capital into lasting financial freedom? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.